So welcome to this video, and I want to tell you what happened to me. I want to tell you a story about what happened to me and how Jesus was involved. So, let's say from the age of 17, 18, 19, I've been a spiritual person. I've been interested in deeper truths, spiritual truth, divine truth, and I was very drawn to spiritual teachings, especially Buddhism, Zen Buddhism, and then other related spiritual teachings about consciousness and, awakening the mind, awakening the heart, and so on and so forth. I lived in spiritual communities, many spiritual communities, and lived with a spiritual teacher in Portugal, and went through intensive processes, cleansing processes, fasting, healing ceremonies, nutritional purification, blah, 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 so on and so forth. However, at the age of 33, while living in a spiritual community called Findhorn in the north of Scotland, God started bringing books across my path related to Jesus. They weren't all Christian books, but they were about Jesus. More New Age perspectives on Jesus, really, but nevertheless, they were about Jesus and the love of Jesus and the light of Jesus. Now, being an open-minded person that I generally have been for most of my life, I've never had a resistance to Jesus. I've never had a resistance to Christianity. I was never drawn to being a Christian, but I had an affinity with Jesus, an affinity with Christ. I felt a kinship with him. And, I wanted to be like Jesus. So when God started bringing these books across my path, then I read them with great interest, and my mind started opening, and God started bringing more things my way, pointing me towards Jesus, the truth of Jesus Christ, but more from a traditional, let's say, biblical perspective. So the New Age books about Jesus kind of got replaced by more, well, what happened to me was God told me to go to Australia. So I went to Australia not knowing why, not having any money. I just went to Australia, arrived there with $20 in my pocket, slept on the beach, had no idea why God had told me to go to Australia, but it was clear to me that he had, and that I was doing the right thing by being there. So I was kind of awaiting God's next instruction. So to cut a very long story short, I ended up helping at the Salvation Army in a famous Australian hippie town. I ended up working for the Salvation Army, handing out food, handing out clothing and bedding and stuff to the homeless people of this town. And because I myself was homeless, I was sleeping with the homeless people myself, and I was hanging out with them and spending a lot of time with them, talking to them, getting to know them. I myself was doing the same things as the homeless people. I was sleeping on the streets. I was going for my meals at the Salvation Army. And at the weekends, all the churches in the area would open their doors and invite all the homeless and hungry people in for a big meal. So that would happen on Saturday and Sunday. Different churches would open their doors, and probably maybe even Friday night, but there were several meals over the weekend where the homeless people were invited to come and eat at the church. So because I was hanging out with homeless people and I was hungry myself and I had no money, I would go to these churches. And I met some really wise, humble people, because I've been involved in the New Age spiritual scene for many years, maybe 15 years at this point, up to the point when I was in Australia, 15 years, and I'd met a lot of spiritual people, not all of whom were wise or humble, quite the opposite. But here in Australia, in these churches, these Christian churches, specifically it was an Adventist church, a Seventh-day Adventist church that I was in, but there were other churches too, and I met some of the humblest and most gentle-hearted and wise people that I'd ever met anywhere. And I really felt the love and humility of these people. And then there was another church where there was some kind of celebration with music, and we were told to put our hands up, and if we hadn't already accepted Christ into our heart, to invite him in, to call out to Jesus and invite him into our heart, which is what I did. There was music playing, I put my hands in the air, and I had no issue, no reservations about saying this, because I had no issue, no resistance towards Jesus. So I thought, well, if there's anything that Jesus can do for me, I'm open to it. So I invited Jesus into my heart, and then within a matter of days, God told me to go back home to Scotland, and reunite with my wife and my 3 children who were there with her in Scotland. And it was time. I kind of served my purpose. I'd done my job here in Australia. It was time to go home. So it was almost like God took me to Australia, into these churches. I don't know why he took me all the way to Australia to go to these churches, but to accept Christ and to receive the Spirit of Christ and to come back a changed man. So I came back to Scotland a changed man.